Now, Nigeria is positioning itself at the center of Africa's push to turn scientific discovery into real healthcare solutions. This week, Abuja is hosting the Spark Africa Translational Research Boot Camp and Scientific Conference as the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, or NIPRD, partners with Stanford University's globally respected Spark initiative. The focus is translational research, the often missing link between laboratory breakthroughs and treatments that actually reach patients. For years, experts say Africa's problem hasn't been ideas, but systems, weak industry linkages, limited mentorship, and poor pathways from research to the market. This conference aims to change that, equipping Nigerian scientists, policymakers, and industry players with the tools to move innovation, backed by government reforms and NIPRD's growing role in vaccine research and local pharmaceutical development. Can this moment help Nigeria shift from importing solutions to exporting clinical and pharmaceutical innovation? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Director General of NIPRD, the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, Dr. Obi Adigwe, and the Co-Director of Spark at Stanford University, Professor Kevin Grimes, who's also Vice President of Spark Global USA. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in.
Thanks for coming.
Let me start with you, Dr. Adigwe. Nigeria produces strong research papers, but very few market-ready products. What specifically is broken in that pipeline? Is it skills? Is it funding? Is it policy? Or is it political will?
Well, it's not only a Nigerian problem.
Well, we're talking about Nigeria,
yes, but translational research is a relatively new paradigm. Science and research started as basic science, and a century ago, 2 centuries ago, our forebears who had inventions, who brought science to the fore, because they were new and they were impacting society right on the spot. It was easy to get discoveries and innovations that were ready for the world and to impact their societies. But we now had a transition to where you now have universities training scientists, and a lot of these universities are tooled more for basic science and basic research. And then, that disconnect began to emerge. And in Nigeria, we have about 250, 300 universities. And when you have that kind of system and you have a society where you need to make your human capital ready to address the problems that are within your system, then you bring in translational research. And under the current administration, as you're aware, there's a big move towards prioritizing science and research. So translational research comes in as the engine room for us to get that done.
Okay.
And our colleagues at Stanford, SPAC at Stanford, are part of that machinery that we're using to bridge that gap.
Okay, let me come to you, Professor Grimes. Thank you very much indeed for welcome to Nigeria, and thank you for joining us. Now, Spark has succeeded globally, but Africa has unique structural challenges. What must Nigeria do differently for the model to work here?
I would say Nigeria is not unique among other countries in translational research, or even in the United States. We started Spark 20 years ago because Stanford, located in the heart of Silicon Valley, was quite good at transferring tech, as in computational and chips and things of that sort, to industry. But actually, it was extremely difficult to take a biomedical discovery that might be turned into a therapeutic or diagnostic and move it out of Stanford University into a company, whether it be a startup company or an existing company coming in and licensing it out. And the fundamental problem, as the Director General was saying, is academics, we are rewarded and we receive research funding to do basic research. And often we'll see that the discoveries we make could benefit patients who have unmet medical needs. But there is this gap.
Right, it's got to move from here to there, basically.
It's called the valley of death. And it's a lack of funding, but fundamentally also a lack of know-how for academics to know how to de-risk these programs enough so that existing companies will take them in, or venture capitalists will actually invest in startup companies to take them in and develop them. I would say actually a minority of universities in the US are equipped to do this, and it really varies throughout the world. But I do believe with the right leadership, political will, and some funding, that we as academics can learn how to do this and make these handoffs happen.
Well, Dr. Adigwe, I mean, I know you've probably heard this before, but how will this Spark program differ from previous conferences? Because, I mean, what you're having is a conference in Abuja here. How will it differ from previous conferences that raised expectations but delivered limited long-term impact?
Well, what we have isn't just the conference. Today was the conference. We're having a whole week of a boot camp.
Right.
So there are colleagues from Stanford, there are colleagues from other parts of Africa who have a detailed hands-on training program from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are seminars, there are lectures, there are breakout sessions.
Right.
So for a whole week, you would have mentors, you would have colleagues who have been there and done that, engaging with scientists, African scientists who brought along their projects. So it will be a system where you can be shown the path of how your project can move from point A to point K.
And who's going to fund that move?
It's already going on. So forget about the funding. That is already going on. Today was day one. So immediately after the conference that ended at 12 noon, the first session began and ended at 5:30. And if you come to the Lagos Osun meeting room tomorrow at 8 a.m., you'll see colleagues from across Africa in the boot camp. So that is already happening. It happened in Zimbabwe 2 years ago. It happened in Mozambique 3 years ago. And there is evidence that the same boot camp model that was used there has led to interventions that either came out as spin-off companies, startups, or clinical trial candidates. So that's the same thing that's going to happen here in Nigeria.
Right. I don't mean to kind of bang on about it or to put you too much on the spot, but can you point to clear success metrics, patents, startups, clinical trials, or something? I mean, you know these things better than I do, that Nigerians should expect after these sort of this conference and all the rest of it.
You've got all three correct. So those are the kind of things that we will be expecting further down the road. And when I say further down the road, I'm talking of within the next 18 to 24 months. Prior to now, which is the reason why we sought Spark at Stanford out and brought them here with the translational research model. Prior to now, the focus was on academics having hundreds of publications, becoming professors, and not impacting society. So it's not just, rethinking the model, changing the attitude. It's also bringing them alongside colleagues that have done this in other parts of the world and succeeded, and ensuring that we all enter the same ecosystem. Now, the second thing that's being done is Spark Nigeria is being launched. And during the conference today, we had vice chancellors, we had CMDs, that's heads of teaching hospitals, we had colleagues from different industries who were sitting in the room and who had indicated that they wanted Spark chapters opened up in their entities. So these will also join the global Spark network, and there will be an ecosystem which will ensure mentoring, guidance, access to funding, access to laboratory, and a framework for you to go from ideas to impact within society and within the clinical settings.
Well, Professor Grimes, he mentioned mentorship, and presumably that's coming from Spark. Many African research initiatives stall after mentorship ends. I don't know whether that's your responsibility or theirs, but how does Spark, let me put it that way, ensure continuity once international partners step back, or it's not up to Spark?
So I would say Spark within the local country probably plays the largest role in terms of making sure things do not stall. But the Spark model is largely centered within the universities. And when we think about developing products, either therapeutics or diagnostics, each is extremely complex. They have their own peculiarities, and you need to start with that end product in mind and work your way towards that to de-risk the program. We started out at Stanford with 5 mentors, and we had a very high success rate in making that leap to getting these moved into companies. We now have many more and still are successful in moving things forward. But the mentorship, really, we continue it from the very beginning when a project enters Spark all the way through until they actually get funded. And we will continue to provide the advice, the mentorship, which is really the most critical component.
Yeah, I mean, and that's encouraging, hearing you saying
until that handoff happens, or until it's clear that this one is just not going to work out. For some reason, it's not going to be the solution that patients need.
And of course, you're moving it from that mentorship, you said, all the way to the companies or the markets or whatever. Will Nigerian researchers retain ownership of their innovations, or is there a risk of intellectual extraction? Let me put it that way.
So part of what we've been discussing today when you talk about intellectual extraction is the idea is for African researchers to develop therapies and diagnostics that solve the problems in Africa, the local problems. And I think in a simplistic view, many people from outside of Africa view that as, there are particular infectious diseases in Africa, and of course those are important. But basically chronic diseases, hypertension and depression and preeclampsia in pregnant women, et cetera. These are all critically important health problems, and because of slight differences in our genetic makeup, polymorphisms, et cetera, it's really critical that in different parts of the world, whether it be Africa, Asia, North America, with our mix of people, mostly from European extraction, that we're developing products that will solve those issues. So the ownership should be staying with the African institutions. In the United States, the ownership is generally retained by the university until they license it out to a company. And then they'll receive royalties when revenue eventually comes in. I would anticipate the same model in Nigeria, where the research institutions would own the patents that are developed, and they license them out, and likewise will benefit from the royalty flow. Ideally, the companies will stay in Africa.
Okay, Doc, we're running out of time. You've secured major wins recently, NIPRID, including, I understand, EU funding for vaccine development and all the rest of it. How do you ensure these gains survive changes in government and bureaucracy? Because that's been a problem in Nigeria in the past.
Well, the key thing is building capacity. Prior to my assumption as Director General, we sort of depended quite a bit on government funding. My principal, the Honorable Minister, under their leadership, we had to begin to diversify. And in the process of diversifying, you're building capacity across the system. And something else my minister has directed is that you shouldn't focus only on building capacity within NIPRED. You should focus on building capacity across the nation, which is why he appointed me the chairman of the Phytomedicines Commercialization Committee, and which is why the SPAC collaboration is not a NIPRED SPAC collaboration, it's a SPAC Nigeria collaboration, which is why we had all the vice chancellors and CMDs and candidates from across Nigeria and across Africa attending today. In a similar vein, the 18 million euros you mentioned with the European Union isn't centered in NIPRED. It's a Nigeria project.
Right.
So there are about 10 different institutions in Nigeria benefiting from that capacity upgrade. And as far as you keep building capacity for scientists to be able to write good grants, for scientists to be able to move their innovation from ideas to impact, you'll be sure that there is a pipeline that will ensure that, you know, the innovation continues and it hits the first target of improving access to healthcare, but at the same time, socio-economic gains in terms of capacity building, revenue generation, and technology transfer. So once you have this ecosystem in place, I'm sure the gains will live beyond us.
Okay, Prof, from Stanford's experience, what is the single hardest leap? Is it lab to market? Is it regulation? Is it financing? And where does Nigeria currently fall short in your assessment?
I would say from a Spark Global perspective, there are two challenges. One is getting funding to de-risk the project. That level of funding doesn't necessarily have to be terribly high.
Right.
At Stanford, we're funding at about $50,000 per project per year, which is much smaller than an overall budget for a research laboratory. The problems otherwise moving forward is convincing the investors to have the same vision that you do, that your product will actually benefit patients and that they will get a strong return on their investment when they move forward. So I'd say those are really the two challenges that we see. One thing I wanted to mention also, when you talked about extracting value from Nigeria, I truly hope it's the opposite. You have excellent researchers here who have thought up important ideas that could be developed. In the United States, 11% of our population is of African descent. Therapeutics that are developed in Nigeria could actually benefit those patients, and hopefully there will be income coming in from other parts of the world to Nigeria as customers for the technologies you develop.
On that hopeful note, I want to thank you both very much indeed, and well done to you. I mean, you're sort of making waves, but let's see how all that translates into, you know, when it comes to moving Nigeria, reducing imports and becoming ultimately, you know, self-sustained and potentially an exporter of pharmaceutical innovation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Obi Adigwe is the Director General of NIPRED, the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development, and Professor Kevin Grimes is the Co-Director of SPARC at Stanford University. He's also Vice President of SPARC Global USA. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.